In 1951, one hidden prop on the I Love Lucy set sparked a revolution. The network called it wasteful. The sponsors thought it was crazy. But this single decision changed television forever, creating a multi-billion-dollar industry overnight. Even more shocking? This secret weapon almost didn't make it onto the show. Today, we're revealing how one piece of equipment turned a sitcom into an empire, and why Hollywood tried to stop it. When Lucille Ball started her career, no one could have guessed she would create something as legendary as I Love Lucy. It all began in 1948 with a radio show called My Favorite Husband. In the show, Lucille played Liz, a funny and charming wife, opposite Richard Denning as her husband. The show became very popular and ran for 124 episodes. But here's the surprising part. Lucille didn't even want to take the role at first. She thought it wasn't right for her. It took her agent and a big salary offer of $1,000 a week, which is worth more than $11,000 today, to convince her. That decision would change television forever. When CBS decided to bring My Favorite Husband to television, Lucille agreed, but only under one condition. Her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, had to play her husband on the show. This idea shocked the network. They couldn't imagine an all-American redhead married to a Cuban band leader on TV. Executives worried audiences wouldn't accept an interracial couple. They were afraid of how viewers, especially in the Midwest and South, might react. CBS even did audience research to test the idea. The results were surprising. Many people found the idea fresh and interesting. Even so, CBS still hesitated. But Lucille and Desi didn't give up. To prove they could work together as a couple on screen, Lucille and Desi came up with a bold plan. They decided to go on a vaudeville tour in 1950. They created a live comedy act in just 2 weeks, working long hours to make it perfect. The tour was intense. They performed in 11 cities over 30 days, sometimes doing 4 shows a day. One of their funniest routines was about Lucy trying to join Desi's band, which would later inspire a scene in the I Love Lucy pilot. They spent $50,000 of their own money on this risky tour, a huge amount at the time. But it worked. When CBS executives saw their final performance in New York, they were amazed by the chemistry between Lucille and Desi. The audience loved them, and the network finally agreed to give them a show. Lucille and Desi weren't just performers, they were also smart business people. In 1950, they created their own production company, Desilu Productions. This was almost unheard of at the time. Actors didn't usually own their own shows. Lucille and Desi took a pay cut, reducing their weekly salary from $5,000 to $4,000, so they could own I Love Lucy. This turned out to be a brilliant move. When the show became a hit, they made millions by selling the rights to rerun episodes, something that wasn't common back then. Desilu became a powerhouse, producing other legendary shows like Star Trek and Mission Impossible. By the late 1950s, Lucille Ball was running one of the biggest production companies in Hollywood, making her the first woman to achieve such success. Another bold move was deciding to film I Love Lucy in Hollywood instead of New York, which was the center of TV production at the time. Back then, TV shows were broadcast live, and the recordings were low quality. In 1951, I Love Lucy completely changed how television shows were made. The team introduced a new way of filming sitcoms using 3 cameras at the same time. This idea came from Carl Freund, the cinematographer, and Al Simon, the associate producer. They used 3 cameras to record long shots, medium shots, and close-ups all at once. The setup used 3 Mitchell BNC cameras on dollies, with 1 in the center for wide shots and 2 on the sides for close-ups. This method made filming faster and let the actors perform without interruptions, like a stage play, while still capturing multiple angles. Although this three-camera system wasn't completely new, Jerry Fairbanks had used something similar in the late 1940s. It was I Love Lucy that made it work perfectly for sitcoms. This system saved time, with setups taking only about 90 seconds between scenes. It also showcased Lucille Ball's incredible physical comedy and expressions, which became a big part of the show's charm. By the end of the first season, I Love Lucy was the most-watched show in the United States, thanks in part to this innovative way of filming. Another major decision was filming the show on 35mm film instead of using kinescope, the standard at the time. Desi Arnaz, Lucille Ball's husband and co-star, pushed for this change even though it was much more expensive. Kinescope recordings were low quality and grainy, but 35mm film had clear, sharp images that would last for years. This decision turned out to be a genius move. Episodes could be rerun in great quality, which brought in over $1 million a year in the mid-1950s. This success showed the potential for reruns and syndication, something unheard of at the time. Filming on 35mm also allowed for better editing. Karl Freund created special lighting to match the needs of the three-camera setup. However, there were challenges, like syncing the cameras and sound. At first, they tried a blue light system but found it unreliable. Dan Kahn, the editor, came up with a giant wooden clapper to solve this problem, making syncing much easier. The show also changed how comedy felt on TV by using a live studio audience during filming. Lucille Ball insisted on this because she loved performing with live reactions, a habit she brought from her radio days. Fire safety rules made it hard to set this up, but Desi Arnaz and producer Jess Oppenheimer worked with CBS to renovate a studio that could safely hold 300 audience members. The live audience added energy to the performances and let the actors adjust their timing based on real-time reactions. Their laughter was recorded and became a key part of the show's experience for viewers at home. Episodes were filmed on Fridays, with the cast rehearsing all week to perfect their performances. One of the most famous episodes, where Lucy gives birth to little Ricky, aired in 1953 and was watched by 44 million people, 72% of all households with TVs at the time. This level of popularity showed how much audiences loved the show and the way it was made. Editing the show was another area where I Love Lucy broke new ground. With three cameras filming simultaneously, editing was difficult. Dan Kahn created a machine called the Three-Headed Monster, which combined three Moviola editing machines into one. This let editors view footage from all three cameras at once, making it faster and easier to pick the best shots. This tool became a standard for multi-camera shows and sped up the editing process significantly. The technical choices made for I Love Lucy had long-lasting effects. The use of 35mm film not only made the show look great when it first aired, but also preserved it for future generations. All 180 episodes survive in high quality, unlike many other shows from that time, which only exist in poor-quality kinescope recordings. The high-quality film also allowed for the episodes to be colorized decades later and remastered for high-definition viewing, making the show timeless and accessible to new audiences. When I Love Lucy started on October 15, 1951, no one expected it to change TV forever. It aired at 9 p.m. on CBS, and the first episode, The Girls Want to Go to a Nightclub, was an instant hit. The mix of funny physical comedy and relatable moments about married life made people love it right away. Within just 4 weeks, it became the third most popular show on TV. The only shows ahead of it were Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts and Texaco Star Theater with Milton Berle. This fast success was surprising because CBS wasn't sure about the show at first. They didn't think viewers would like seeing Lucille Ball and her real-life Cuban husband, Desi Arnaz, as a married couple on screen. To prove they worked well together, Lucy and Desi went on a live vaudeville tour in 1950. Their performances were so funny and well-received that CBS finally agreed to give them a chance. By the end of its first season, in June 1952, I Love Lucy was a massive hit. The show had an average rating of 50.9, which meant more than half of American homes with TVs watched it every week. This was about 11 million households, and the audience kept growing. Even critics who weren't sure about the show at first began praising it. Newspapers like the New York Times changed their opinion as the show became a cultural phenomenon. By April 1952, just 6 months after the first episode, it was the most talked-about show in the country, reaching 11 million viewers. In its second season, the success grew even more. The show's average rating jumped to 67.3, which meant almost 68% of TV-owning homes were watching every week. That was about 13.72 million households, an incredible number for the early 1950s, when not everyone owned a TV. I Love Lucy became the #1 show in America during the 1952 to 1953 season. For 4 of its 6 seasons, it stayed in the top spot, or very close to it. Even in its last season, 1956 to 1957, it still drew almost 17 million households each week, proving how much people loved Lucy. In the second season of I Love Lucy, something unexpected happened. Lucille Ball found out she was pregnant with her second child, Desi Arnaz Jr., in 1952. This caused quite a stir among the production team and network executives because, at that time, pregnancy was not something openly shown on TV. It was seen as a sensitive and even scandalous subject. CBS and the show's sponsor, Philip Morris Cigarettes, were hesitant to include the pregnancy in the storyline. But Desi Arnaz and producer Jess Oppenheimer saw this as a chance to make history on television. This decision was groundbreaking. It was the first time a pregnant actress played a pregnant character on TV. However, they had to be careful about how they handled it. For example, they couldn't even say the word pregnant on air. Instead, they used words like expecting or the French term enceinte. This added humor to the show as viewers watched Lucy and Ricky Ricardo navigate the challenges of becoming parents while following the strict rules of the 1950s. The storyline reached its peak with the episode Lucy Goes to the Hospital, which aired on January 19, 1953. The timing of the episode was carefully planned to match Lucille Ball's real-life delivery of her son. She gave birth by cesarean section the same day the episode aired. This combination of real life and TV fiction created a huge media event. Around 71.7% of American TV sets were tuned in, which was even more than the number of people who watched President Dwight Eisenhower's inauguration the next day. Over 44 million viewers watched, proving how deeply audiences were invested in Lucy's story. During this time, another problem arose. As Lucille Ball's pregnancy advanced, it became clear she needed rest before giving birth. The production team still had to deliver 39 episodes for the season, which created a big challenge. Desi Arnaz and Jess Oppenheimer came up with an idea that was very bold for the time. Instead of rushing to film new episodes, they decided to rebroadcast some of the most popular episodes from the first season. Back then, reruns weren't common, and many people doubted if audiences would accept them. This decision was risky. No one knew if viewers would want to rewatch episodes they had already seen. Sponsors worried people might lose interest, and the show could lose its popularity. But CBS and Philip Morris agreed to try it, mainly because they didn't want to lose their primetime slot for such a hit show. The episodes chosen for rebroadcast were some of the best, like the famous Lucy Does a TV commercial episode where Lucy hilariously promotes Vitamea Vegamin and the ballet, known for its physical comedy. The production team even made small edits to improve the quality of these episodes before showing them again. To everyone's surprise, the reruns were a huge success. The rebroadcast episodes got just as many viewers as the original ones, and sometimes even more. For example, the Vitamea Vegamin episode's rerun drew a 68% audience share, which was higher than its original 67% share. This success happened because more people owned TVs by then, giving new viewers a chance to watch episodes they had missed. The show's timeless humor also kept loyal fans happy to rewatch their favorite moments. The reruns created a new kind of excitement. People who had seen the episodes before were eager to watch again and share their favorite scenes with others. This sense of anticipation turned reruns into a cultural phenomenon and even started what we now call water cooler talk about TV shows. The financial benefits of reruns were huge. Shows could make money long after their original air date, which changed the business side of TV. Studios began focusing on creating shows with lasting appeal, knowing they could profit from reruns for years. This also opened the door to syndication, where local TV stations could buy old episodes to air independently. By 1967, CBS was offering I Love Lucy episodes for syndication, creating a whole new market for television content. Lucy Ricardo, played by Lucille Ball, also broke barriers by challenging traditional gender roles. In the 1950s, TV wives were usually shown as obedient and happy to stay in their domestic roles. But Lucy was different. She constantly dreamed of independence and stardom, often clashing with her husband Ricky's expectations. One famous example is the episode Job Switching, where Lucy and Ricky swap roles. Lucy works in a candy factory while Ricky stays home to do housework. The hilarious scene of Lucy struggling with the fast-moving chocolate conveyor belt became iconic. It poked fun at both factory and domestic work, showing that neither was as easy as people assumed. This episode aired in 1952, long before many conversations about gender equality gained momentum. Another memorable episode, Lucy Does a TV Commercial, featured Lucy attempting to break into show business by advertising a health tonic called Vitamea Vegamin. Her over-the-top performance, as she accidentally gets drunk on the tonic, showed her comedic brilliance and highlighted her desire for a career beyond being a housewife. This episode remains one of the funniest in TV history. The show also addressed gender issues more directly in episodes like Equal Rights, where Lucy and her friend Ethel demand equal treatment from their husbands. Although the storyline was played for laughs, it highlighted the ridiculousness of gender inequality. This aired in 1953, a full decade before the Equal Pay Act was passed. Even though Lucy's plans often failed and she returned to her role as a housewife by the end of each episode, her determination and creativity resonated with women watching the show. Her character challenged societal expectations in a way that was subtle yet impactful for the time. The mix of humor and progressiveness made I Love Lucy truly ahead of its time and left a lasting influence on television and culture. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz seemed like the perfect couple on screen as Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, but their real-life marriage was filled with problems. They met in 1940 while working on the movie Too Many Girls and married soon after. However, their relationship quickly ran into trouble. Desi was often unfaithful and drank too much. By 1944, Lucille was so unhappy that she filed for divorce. She later decided to stay with him, hoping that working together on I Love Lucy might bring them closer. The show was a massive success, airing from 1951 to 1957 and watched by millions. But instead of helping their marriage, it made things worse. Desi's drinking became a bigger problem, and he would sometimes show up drunk on set. One of the cast members even recalled him yelling and acting out in front of the audience. In 1955, a magazine exposed Desi's infidelities, making things even harder for Lucille. Desi reportedly justified his actions by saying he only had affairs with sex workers, not other women. But this public embarrassment hurt Lucille deeply. Despite everything, they continued to work together and play a loving couple on screen. By 1960, Lucille couldn't take it anymore and filed for divorce, ending their marriage and marking the end of an era for the beloved show. While the show was about love and laughter, there was also tension between the cast. William Frawley and Vivian Vance, who played Fred and Ethel Mertz, had a bitter relationship. Their on-screen chemistry hid a real-life feud. One of the main issues was their age difference. Frawley was 64, and Vance was only 42 when the show began in 1951. Vance didn't like being cast as the wife of someone so much older, and she made comments about it, calling him an old coot. When Frawley heard this, he was insulted and started making rude jokes about Vance's appearance. The two constantly clashed, refusing to speak to each other unless it was for a scene. Their feud was so intense that when Vance was offered a spin-off with Frawley, she immediately said no. Even years later, when Frawley died in 1966, Vance reportedly celebrated, saying, "Champagne for everybody." Lucille Ball also had her own issues with Vivian Vance when she was first cast as Ethel. Lucille, who was 40 at the time, felt threatened by Vance, who was close to her age and also attractive. Lucille wanted to be the only glamorous woman on the show, so she initially disliked having Vance around. To solve this, the producers made Vance wear frumpier clothes to downplay her looks. Over time, Lucille realized how talented and professional Vance was. They eventually became close friends, with their bond lasting until Vance's death in 1979. Lucille Ball changed the way comedy worked on television with I Love Lucy. Her fearless use of physical comedy was unlike anything people had seen from a female star in the 1950s. She wasn't afraid to look silly or do crazy stunts, things women on TV didn't usually do back then. Her background in vaudeville gave her the skills to make slapstick funny and believable. One famous example was the Vitameata Vegamin scene where Lucy gets drunk while filming a commercial for a health tonic. Her acting in this scene, with funny facial expressions and slurred speech, showed how talented she was. It took 65 takes to get it perfect, because she wanted it to feel real, even drinking real apple pectin for her reactions. Lucille Ball's style inspired so many comedians after her. Mary Tyler Moore and Carol Burnett said she was their role model. Even male comedians like Robin Williams and Jim Carrey followed her bold approach to comedy. Her work influenced sitcoms for decades, especially because of how the show used a 3-camera filming method. This let the cameras capture her full body in action, showing every move she made. This style became the standard for sitcoms like The Dick Van Dyke Show and Friends. One of the most famous moments in the show was the grape stomping scene from the episode Lucy's Italian Movie. Lucille had to stomp grapes in a giant vat with an Italian actress, Teresa Tirelli de Amico. But something went wrong because they didn't speak the same language. The scene was supposed to be a funny fight, but de Amico thought it was real. When Lucille accidentally hit her, de Amico grabbed her throat and pushed her down into the grapes. Lucille couldn't breathe, and she had grapes in her nose and ears. She was genuinely scared and fought back to get free. The studio audience thought it was part of the joke and laughed while Lucille was struggling. Even the crew didn't realize she was in danger until it was over. The scene was edited to remove the scariest parts, but it became one of the most iconic moments in television history. I Love Lucy was also great at combining crazy slapstick with everyday problems people could relate to. The show took simple situations and made them hilarious. For example, in the episode The Freezer, Lucy buys a whole side of beef to save money, but doesn't know how to store it in her small apartment. Things get worse when she hides the meat in the furnace. Another classic episode, Job Switching, starts with a fight about household chores. Lucy and Ethel end up working at a candy factory, leading to the famous scene where they struggle with chocolates on a conveyor belt. These episodes worked because they started with problems everyone understood, and then turned them into over-the-top comedy. The writers of the show were brilliant at balancing the silly with the real. They based many of the stories on real-life events, so even the wildest moments felt grounded. Lucy's character was outrageous, but her motivations were relatable. She wanted to be part of her husband's world, make friends, or prove herself. This made people laugh at her antics, while also feeling for her. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz made a bold decision to keep ownership of I Love Lucy through their company, Desilu Productions. This choice had a huge impact, not just on their lives, but on the entire television industry. When the show ended in 1957, syndication, the process of rerunning shows, was a new idea. But I Love Lucy stayed so popular that by 1967, CBS was paying $100,000 for each rerun episode, even though the original episodes had cost only $39,000 to make. This showed how valuable a hit show could be, even long after it aired. With the profits from I Love Lucy, Desilu grew quickly. In 1957, they used the money to buy RKO Studios for $6 million, making them one of the biggest independent production companies in Hollywood. This gave them the tools to create other hit shows like Star Trek and Mission Impossible. These shows became a big part of TV history, just like I Love Lucy. By 1991, 40 years after the show first aired, it was still making $20 million a year from reruns. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $40 million today. Even now, in 2025, nearly 75 years after its debut, I Love Lucy still earns money, airing in over 80 countries and translated into many languages. Somewhere in the world, an episode plays every hour of every day. This success wasn't just good for Desilu, it changed how the TV industry works. People realized that shows could keep earning money for decades, so networks and studios started planning for long-term profits. The I Love Lucy model inspired the way shows like Friends, Seinfeld, and The Office made millions from syndication deals. Desilu Productions, built from I Love Lucy's success, didn't just stop there. It grew into a major force in the TV industry. When it started in 1950, the company only had 12 employees. By 1957, it had 800. The big moment came in 1958, when Desilu bought RKO Studios for $6 million. This gave them control of 33 sound stages, more than big studios like MGM or 20th Century Fox. The deal also included the 40 acres backlot, where parts of shows like The Andy Griffith Show were filmed. Desilu didn't just focus on I Love Lucy. They helped create or support some of the most famous TV shows ever, including Star Trek, Mission Impossible, The Untouchables, and The Dick Van Dyke Show. Lucille Ball played a huge role in this. After divorcing Desi Arnaz, she ran Desilu by herself. When other studios turned down Star Trek, saying it was too expensive, she gave it the green light. That decision launched one of the biggest entertainment franchises in history and showed how willing Desilu was to take risks on creative ideas.